Hey y'all, Rick Houston here, and I want to tell you about my new show, the Moonshine and Motorsports Racing Podcast. I've partnered up with the state of North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources to help uncover the history behind moonshining mountain boys, professional wheelmen, and the backwoods and city lights of the Tar Heel State. In the first episode, I sat down with Winston Kelly at the NASCAR Hall of Fame for a little behind-the-scenes gossip about Junior Johnson's engineering skills.
He's got two things in his hand, pipe wrench and channel lock pliers. And they weren't new. They had been around the block a time or two.
Wasn't the first steel they built, I bet.
No, I think the pliers had been red before, but paint had worn off.
And in the second episode, I talked to a professional hillbilly, a.k.a. Dr. Daniel Pierce of UNC Asheville, to find out the real history of moonshiners and their battles with the revenuers.
He wrote about one of his experience of trying to chase down this bootlegger in this souped-up car, and he complained that the government gave him these piece of crap, cheapo cars, and that were really no match, but he thought he was doing pretty good, and then the guy just hits it and just takes off and practically disappeared. But then the guy makes a bootleg turn and comes back towards him. And as he said, it was a game of chicken, and I was the chicken. And so he ran off the road. And actually, he was the guy who caught Junior Johnson at his daddy's steel when Junior got tangled up in a barbed wire fence.
So check out the Moonshine and Motorsports Racing Podcast, available on YouTube, dailydownforce.com, and all of your favorite podcasting platforms. And be sure to check out my regular show on NASCAR history, the Scene Vault Podcast.
Hey there, NASCAR fans. Have you got your copy of the latest edition of NASCAR Pole Position Print Magazine? If not, there's no better time than now to subscribe at polepositionmag.com. NASCAR Pole Position is the only print magazine covering NASCAR. Officially licensed by NASCAR, NASCAR Pole Position Magazine is published throughout the NASCAR season, and each edition is an instant collector's item, packed with great feature stories and photography. The magazine is even mailed to you in a poly bag for those who love to collect NASCAR memorabilia. At polepositionmag.com, you can even find past issues available to purchase. Get your subscription to NASCAR Pole Position and get great NASCAR content delivered straight to your mailbox throughout the season. Learn more at polepositionmag.com. That's polepositionmag.com. Welcome to the Pickup Throwdown Truck Series podcast, the only NASCAR podcast that's always down to truck. And now, your host, Dale Tanhardt.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the newest installment of the Pickup Throwdown podcast, a podcast specifically for the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. We just had one hell of a weekend at Martinsville Speedway. A lot to break down here for the Craftsman Truck Series. I'm Dale Tanhardt, joined by Josh Lipowski, contributor to the Daily Downforce and a contributor to the NASCAR world when it comes to his knowledge, insight, and just overall expertise, especially with the Craftsman Truck Series. We had the triple header this weekend, and it started with trucks. We gave our predictions last Sunday night. We were pretty close. I was pretty close. I think you did okay with Raja as your favorite. I had Ty Majeski.
Yeah, I mean, top 10, I'll take it. A top 10 finish for Raja Crew. Didn't lead a lap. He worked on his truck all night, ended up with the top 10. I'll take it, all things considered.
Yeah.
I will say, in my Martinsville preview in the Daily Downforce, I did say to watch out for Christian Eckes, so I feel pretty happy that Christian Eckes ended up getting himself the win last weekend. So I'd say overall, I'd say I was pretty happy with my picks that I had overall.
Christian Eckes did win the race, the Long John Silver's 200 on Friday night. He's like the William Byron of the Truck Series at this point in time. Be sure to be following. Let me throw this in real quick. Be sure to be following the Daily Downforce.com. Make sure you bookmark it. Check us out there every single day. Follow me at Dale Tanhardt on any social media platform, and follow Josh Lipowski, aka at JLipowski18 on Twitter, for all that expertise, wisdom, insight that I was talking about. And ironically, I give you that plug and I interrupt your expertise, wisdom, insight. So go ahead with the point you wanted to make there.
I love that you're highlighting my insight and my expertise. I love that. Thank you so much, Dale.
Oh yeah, and I saw
Anyway,
your
regardless.
updates. Also, a lot of good updates for the racing as well too on that Twitter channel.
Ooh, absolutely. I'm be sure to follow me. Trust me. Whenever if there's a Truck Series race happening on a Friday night, particularly, I mean, I'll be watching the race this Friday night too. Go ahead and give me a follow, because you better believe there's going to be a lot going on there on my Twitter account for whatever's going on with the Truck Series. But I just wanted to make this comment, Dale. I'm so happy that you and I get to talk about the good race, or one of the good races that happened this weekend, because we all know that the Cup Series race was an utter flop at Martinsville, well, just like it always is with the next gen car. But we get to talk about a good race that happened this weekend in the Truck Series. Yes, a little messy, I'll admit that, a little bit of a messy race. You expect that with Martinsville, it kind of happens with it. But I think you look past that, it was a really good, entertaining race that featured a little bit of strategy. The two best drivers were going at it at the end of the race. I think it had a little bit kind of everything that you kind of wanted out of it. So I was pretty thrilled with the action we got. I'm happy we get to talk about a good race. That's what makes me happy heading into this podcast.
Yeah, I think that I've got a lot I'd love to just hammer out there on Cup, and I'll take to social media for that. The Xfinity race was great. I thought that was the race of the weekend. But yeah, the truck race was good, especially when you consider last year was a rain-shortened event. You had Kyle Busch in it, who actually didn't win. It was Corey Heim. And yeah, you had a couple guys that were the main players. But, with Martinsville, with short track races, generally in the Craftsman Truck Series, they do tend to be a track position game because you don't have as many laps. The stage breaks, I think this is a problem in all of NASCAR, but especially with trucks, because there's fewer laps, these races go by quick. And the stage breaks are too long, because in the stage breaks, we wind down way too many laps. We need to cut the amount of laps that we're running under caution in all of NASCAR. But it hurts the Truck Series more than anything, just because there is less laps. And that's kind of what makes it more of a track position race. But you had intriguing strategy that completely affected the outcome of this race. With Majeski and Eckes, who were the two best trucks, the two best drivers, on two completely different game plans. And that is fun. You saw an ability to pass. You saw a lot of people roughing each other up. You saw some crashes. As you stated, it was kind of messy. And that's typical of the youth in the Truck Series. And that we'll get into that a little bit later, because it wasn't just the youth this time. But
oh, no, it was not.
No,
it was not.
But overall, I agree with you in the sentiment that it was a good race. And there were some good storylines to come from it as well. And moving ahead here, Christian Eckes was a winner. Ty Majeski finished second. Just going through the results. Chase Purdy, I don't know where he came from. Now, he did get some other stage points, but Chase Purdy, I believe, was on the Christian Eckes strategy when everything became a split bag after the end of stage 2, where Majeski in a prior caution had went ahead and pitted to get his fuel and to get his tires, because there wasn't a substantial amount of tire fall off. And Eckes, I think, got there with 10, 12 to go to take the lead here to win. And Chase Purdy was on his strategy as well and snuck up there to get a top 3, his best finish of the season. Nick Sanchez was up there with the top 5, Tyler Ankrum with the top 5, and then a lot of the other normal suspects like Taylor Gray, Raja Caruth, Corey Heim in the top 10. Got to give a couple shout-outs. Caden Honeycutt has been very impressive in the Nice Motorsports number 45 truck. Yeah, he did punt somebody, wreck somebody in the back of the field. Still, with his truck beaten and battered, this kid is a good race car driver. He impresses, it seems like, every time he gets behind the wheel for Nice, and he got a top 10 with a P9. And then Mason Massey in the Young's Motorsports truck in the 02 with a P11. I don't know if anyone saw that coming. So those are two very formidable, reputable runs. Put some respect on their names, at least for this past weekend at Martinsville. Caden Honeycutt, Mason Massey. And then you go down this list. A lot of guys that got spun out. I want to talk about Layne Riggs. That's the first thing we both, when we hopped on here, we kind of dug into, was the fact that we finally saw the speed. This is the track type that we expect Layne Riggs to perform at based on his resume, heading into a full-time spot with a good team in the Truck Series. And he came out, practiced well, qualified up in the top 3, ran up in the top 3. And then, as me and you were kind of chatting up before this, a victim of circumstance throughout the race, right?
Yeah, and that's really what kind of breaks your heart about Layne Riggs is like you knew this was a race coming into it. And I was kind of upset, afterwards. I was thinking, man, he could have been, you made a good dark horse pick with Layne Riggs there because Layne Riggs really, this is his bread and butter. Short track racing. This is what he is. we've kind of seen this year how Layne Riggs has struggled at times, kind of getting used to racing on these bigger racetracks. And you see this a lot of times with guys, particularly like, you don't see this as much with like guys that are super, super young and raw, but guys that are older that are kind of coming up in the cups into the national series, kind of in like their early to mid 20s that are so used to racing on short tracks. You'll see them kind of struggle to transition kind of into that, into racing on the bigger tracks. People coming from road courses deal with the same thing. You see all these guys that race so long on road courses that come in and struggle to race on the big tracks. Layne Riggs was kind of dealing with that to an extent, had the penalty too. But he did everything right. He qualified third. He was running up in the top 5 all throughout stage 1. He did a really, really solid job. He ended up finishing third in stage 1, as a matter of fact. But he ended up having some issues. He ended up with a pit road penalty, which kind of caught him back in the field. And then he 3 times was spun out, completely not on his own. He completely was just kept on getting spun out himself. And it just, a lot of people like to say, and I'm always a guy that like, if guys keep getting spun out at the back of the pack, I sometimes kind of, a lot of people, I don't always like to subscribe to the idea that they're totally victims, just because I feel like if you're racing in the back of the pack most of the time, you're kind of making your own luck at that point. But Layne Riggs is one of those rare cases where it was just none of this was his fault. Like he just ended up getting caught up. Like issue on pit road. Then you have all these guys that keep spinning him out every time he tries to move forward. And it's just tough. And the fact that Layne Riggs came back to finish 15th after all of that for getting spun out 3 times, I honestly think that's really impressive. I give Layne Riggs a lot of credit for that. But it's just really been frustrating. And this is a multi-week thing too, because you go back to Coda. He led a lap at Coda, qualified in the top 10, really was looking really good. And then he had that issue, and then he had that mechanical problem that set him back in the pits and kind of ruined his day. So it's been really kind of frustrating for Layne Riggs, because it just feels like with him, like it just feels like it feels like that front row team just can't put a race together. Like it's like if the pit crew is doing well, if all the mechanical issues with the car are all solved, Layne Riggs just doesn't have a lot of speed. The weeks that Layne Riggs has a lot of speed, something happens. You even go back to Atlanta, the failed inspection at Atlanta. It's just been a tough year to this point for Layne Riggs, but I think take some solace from Martinsville in that Layne Riggs showed he absolutely has the talent if he can just if front row can put a whole race together. And it's just disappointing that he kind of got, he just was kind of in the hornet's nest there in the middle of the field. And if you're there in Martinsville, regardless of how you're put there, you're asking for trouble if you're in that hornet's nest at Martinsville a lot of times. I would argue that running in the middle of the pack at Martinsville is as treacherous, if not more treacherous, than running in the middle of the pack at Talladega, I would argue. Look at how many cautions there were over the course of the night. So this is one of those rare instances where if a guy runs in the back of the pack, and I think where if a guy runs in the back of the pack, gets spun, I always give the little caveat usually of like, well, if you qualify in the back, you kind of make your own luck. But I don't think that was the case with Layne Riggs. I think Layne Riggs was purely a victim of circumstance, like you said.
And what was the pit penalty? What was the pit penalty he had?
I'm trying to see what the pit penalty was. I'll go ahead and pull up this pit report. Now, let's see if the pit obviously, still getting spun out 3 times. I don't know what you can do about that. Here, let's see. Pull up the penalty report here that I have access to because I have tremendous connections that allow me to do that. Let's see what it is. Wow, Layne Riggs. It's not mentioned, so I guess it wasn't a penalty. I guess it was just a slow stop for some reason.
Look, that doesn't surprise me because remember with Zane Smith. Zane Smith was a winning guy and a winning truck every single week, it seemed like. And a lot of times his pit crew took him out of races. So I was going to say, I was trying to remember what the penalty was if there was one. And I just didn't know if I had missed it.
Yeah.
But
I thought it was a penalty, but
it's
I guess
easy to think. Well, I mean, it's easy to think that, oh, he got a penalty, that's why he was sent all the way back, when it could have just been his pit crew that has let down the driver of the 38 truck many, many times over the years. So that doesn't surprise me. But Layne Riggs, a guy that we expect to be a factor and continue to get better, still outside the top 20 in points in the Craftsman Truck Series. Pretty crazy to think about when you think about that number 38 front row Ford F-150. Now, I want to talk about, when we talk about Layne Riggs, there was an accident, I believe it was maybe Infinger or someone else, some of these veterans that were spinning each other out. You know, I talked about the youth, but there were veterans that were involved in a lot of these nonsense accidents. And one of them towards the end took out the supercars guy, Mr. Cam Waters, making his NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series debut. Interesting place to make your debut at, but he had an opportunity with Thor Sport and the number 66 truck. Always was wondering throughout the week how he would do. Kind of hung around the top 20, and then he got taken out. What do you think about Cam Waters?
I mean, choosing Martinsville actually makes more sense than you think, because you kind of drive Martinsville like a road course to a large extent. Because like at Martinsville, it's heavy braking into the turn. It's kind of like driving into a hairpin at a road course. And then you have to kind of baby the throttle and then get yourself to a point where you can floor it off the corner. That's kind of the thing there. It's very, very similar to driving on a road course. I mean, it's essentially like driving into the Sonoma hairpin for 200 laps, twice a lap for 200 laps. That's essentially what Martinsville is. Long story short. So it actually makes some sense. I don't think that it's as crazy as some people would claim. But I thought Cam Waters did pretty well. I mean, you saw last year SVG when he was in the Truck Series. I mean, he struggled in his first truck start. I mean, kind of hung out around the top 20. I thought Cam Waters did a pretty good job. Again, just kind of a victim of circumstance there, which again, you know, I mean, if you're riding around on the back in the Hornet's Nest at Martinsville, I mean, you're kind of asking for trouble in some regards. But then again, I mean, this is a guy that this is his first ever race. So, I mean, I'm not gonna knock him too much for that. You know, but I thought he did a fine job. I felt overall, I thought it was fine. I thought it was pretty decent. I'm curious to see. I mean, again, there's some discrepancy because the Fox Sports reported during the race that Cam Waters was supposed to make a start at Kansas coming up here in a couple of weeks, which that would be another interesting track to go to, like a true oval. But Cam Waters disputed that report post-race, so I don't know exactly what's true, what's not. One guy saying one thing, you have Cam Waters saying another. Maybe it's possible that Waters has plans to do that, but you know, he's trying to line up sponsors or schedules, things like that. But I'd love to see him do it again. That's, I think, that's the thing. I'd love to see him try it again. Love to see what he can do if he gives himself another chance. I definitely believe, you know, I think he did fine overall. Is kind of my thought on
I think it would be good for someone like him to run like a Kansas or something where you can actually run laps without interruption, right? Like, look, I love Martinsville, and that's a good point about the braking with the road course style stuff. But in the Truck Series, this is a crazy place to make your debut just because I feel like you don't get enough actual run. Like, it's so interrupted by the stage cautions and then the calamity that do you ever feel like you learn a lot other than getting wrecked, avoiding wrecks, and stopping and starting. So a race like Kansas, I think, would be a good one for him to go to if he actually was. But as you said, who knows if that's actually going to happen or not. Back to the main guys here. Ty Majeski, Christian Eckes dominated this race. Majeski led like 60-something laps whenever Eckes went off sequence, and then Eckes basically led all the other laps. We highlighted some guys in the top 10. My pick, and not just my pick in our podcast, but my top bet was also Ty Majeski to win this race, so pretty frustrating. I don't want to say I want to, but I know it's probably not right, and I'm potentially being blinded by my own animosity because I lost money over it. But part of me wants to say Ty Majeski gave up another win. But as I just mentioned, I know that may not be right because I think Christian Eckes did have the truck to beat, but I thought Majeski had the winning strategy. What's your take on the battle that these two had and where we go now heading into Texas next weekend? Who's the favorite? Because, yeah, Eckes has the wins. Ty Majeski is actually now the new point leader. He's leading the points And I guess you could say he's leading the charge for the Ford program and all of NASCAR's National Series with that. So
I mean,
what's your take?
I mean, it's weird because like I wouldn't have thought of Ty Majeski being the point leader, but he is at this point. I mean, it's very interesting. I will say it is kind of I think that seeing where he is in the points right now kind of makes me want to talk to the Winston Cup stands out there, because people that talk about the Winston Cup format right now, we're looking at, and again, this isn't the exact Winston Cup format, but I'm just saying season-long format, the guy that hasn't even won a race this season is leading the points. You have a guy with multiple wins sitting in fourth. So I'm just saying, people complained about this back in the day. You'd be complaining about it again if we did away with the playoffs. I'm just saying, just pointing that out there. But back to Ty Majeski. I believe that, that was a race that I think Majeski had to do well at, because you mentioned it last week. Ty Majeski's really, really, really good on short tracks. That's really what his bread and butter is. He's had some good results, earlier in the season. He had a pretty good race at Las Vegas earlier this year, led some laps at Las Vegas. I don't know if he won I think he won the first two stages at Las Vegas, if I remember right. Yeah, I did. He did. I just checked the results of that race. So, I definitely think this could be interesting because, the track's coming up. I mean, when you look at the fact that you have, Texas coming up next week, an intermediate track that, Majeski's kind of sneaky good at. You have Darlington coming up, and then you have North Wilkesboro coming up pretty soon as well. There are some tracks coming up that Ty Majeski, I feel like, would suit him really, really well. You even have Charlotte coming up. So these next four races, Texas, Kansas, Darlington, North Wilkesboro, Charlotte. I mean, there's a lot of intermediates in there. Darlington's kind of an intermediate as well. I would consider it that. North Wilkesboro being a short track. I think that Ty Majeski has the potential to really make some noise these next few races, and I'm really curious to see kind of what he does as we kind of get to the, it's hard to realize this, Dale, but we're almost to the halfway point of the regular season. So, the whole question of like, it's really early in the season, you can make up points later, that time frame is quickly starting to dwindle. So having that points lead is really important here for Ty Majeski, especially without having a win yet. But I think Majeski will get a win eventually. I actually think by the end of May, I think he'll have a win. With these next four races coming up, I'd say North Wilkesboro is probably his best chance. But I think these next 4 or 5 races, I think he'll get a win somewhere in there, I think, based on how he ran at Martinsville.
Gotta believe it. Gotta believe it's going to happen with 3 top 5s in the first 6 races, all the amount of laps he's led. Knocking on the door, right? Knocking on the door. I just feel like he does this and he gives races away, whether it's his fault or not. It's like Truex and Cup, Allgaier and Xfinity, Majeski and Truck. They're like the same guy in each NASCAR National Series. They lead laps. They do well in the points. They do win races. But it seems like you always find them giving away more wins than they're taking away. So, but yeah, nonetheless, that's a great point about the points with Majeski.
Yes. I'm going to count. I'm on his racing reference page right now. I've counted. Let's see. That's 1 second place finish, 2, 3, 4, 5. He has 6 second place finishes in his career against 3 wins. So take that for what it's worth.
There you go.
You talked about him. You talked about him giving races away. I mean, heck, 6 second place finishes against 3 wins. I think that tells you that definitely says you might be onto something, Dale. I think you might be.
Well, then we're not even thinking about, there's got to be a couple races in there where maybe he did dominate and didn't finish second, finished 3rd or 4th, or was involved in a wreck or something that relegated him more than just a second. But nonetheless, it makes my blood boil thinking about it because Majeski losing the lead with 25 to go hurt my bets this past weekend. But that's a selfish conversation. I can be selfish about my bets later this week when we look forward towards Texas. As we've kind of talked about all this, Christian Eckes, man, this guy has, it seems like week by week, I just see more of a swagger with him. Like in his interviews, the way he presents himself, he just seems so confident that he is the guy. Every single week, it seems like he's more and more poised to be, and maybe he knows it, that he's the front runner of the series. He is the best. He's just got this swagger to him that I don't see in a lot of the other drivers in the field when we see them on TV talking to the media. And now he's certainly solidified himself as king of at least the short tracks. We've seen good performance, but we hadn't seen this electric performance at the mile and a halves and the road courses that we've seen at the short tracks as of recent. He qualifies up front, he leads laps, and now he's closing out races. Christian Eckes, would you say with Corey Heim, Ty Majeski, Roger Carruth, Nick Sanchez, a lot of guys that are hard chargers right now, would you say that Eckes is the favorite to win the championship heading down this stretch you just mentioned?
Ooh, I gotta tell you about Christian Eckes. I mean, the thing that I like about Christian Eckes is that Christian Eckes has this kind of flair for the dramatic where he's able to just win races. Like, he wins a lot of races. And ultimately, that matters when you get down towards the end of the season because, I mean, you've seen it, like, throughout the years. And obviously, last year was a bit of an exception. But, Christian, the vast majority of the time, if you want to get into that last race of the season, you've got to win it if you're going to win the championship. That's just what generally tends to happen across all three National Touring Series. You look at a guy like Corey Heim, and I think Corey Heim is the guy that people look at as like the favorite for the championship, right now. And rightfully so. He's got the most top 10s in the series, hasn't finished worse than 10th all year long. The fact that 10th at Martinsville was considered a down night for Corey Heim is pretty incredible. But, Corey Heim only has 4 career wins, or I think 6 career wins. He only had 3 last year, only has 1 so far this year. Christian Eckes really kind of has that flair for the dramatic, and also the fact that he has a win at Phoenix because he's really good at short tracks. I think there's definitely an argument that he could be one of the top. I think he could be one of the championship favorites. Now, I'm still personally, I still want to give a little bit of an edge to Corey Heim, just because Corey Heim was the guy to beat at Phoenix last year before Carson Hocevar took him out. Man, RIP to that race. That was that. If anyone stayed up to watch that race, boy, you were in for something. But still, I'm stopping short of calling him the favorite. I'm still giving it to Corey Heim because Corey Heim was really good at Phoenix last year. But that flair for the dramatic, that's what I love about Christian Eckes, is he wins races. And, Corey Heim's a guy that's really consistent. But here's the thing. In this modern form of NASCAR, like, you need to win races if you want to win a championship. That's what it has to be. I mean, wins mean more. I would argue wins mean more in the sport nowadays than they ever have. And the fact that Christian Eckes nowadays, I mean, he has 5 top 10s. I mean, he had 13 all of last year. He's almost gotten half the top 10s he had all of last season. He's starting to kind of combine that consistent winning races with the consistency. And that's a really scary combination to have. And I really hope that a Cup team takes or takes him under their wing at some point. I really hope so, because this guy's really starting to show, he's kind of got that Zane Smith quality to him where he's starting to really show his muscle, and you're hoping someone gives him a shot. Yeah,
that's a good segue into this conversation that we've had a couple times now. And last week we talked about a lot of the guys, and Eckes was on the list actually, of these young guns and their potential progression through the NASCAR ladder. Where would you say at this point, with a packed and stacked group of youth that's going to be working their way up through the National Series, where does Christian Eckes fit into all that? One thing I got to say, just to start this topic here, McAnally has expanded so much in the Truck Series. Is there an opportunity where McAnally gets into the Xfinity Series with Eckes and brings something up there? We've seen it with Haley Deegan in the what is the team? AM the team that was in the trucks? Yeah. AM Racing. Yeah. Is that something you think is possible if there's no other options for Eckes to land a better ride or a competitive ride moving up the rankings? I think it's possible, and I think it might end up being something he has to do, because I think if you look at the current stable of all of these Cup teams, like it's quite stacked at this point. I think if you look at, you look at Christian Eckes in particular, like think about all the guys that are in there at Chevy. I mean, you still have Roger Carruth, who has the backing of Jeff Gordon and Rick Hendrick, and Roger Carruth has a win this year. He's not as high as Eckes is in points, but still, I mean, he's had a good enough year to this point to where, Roger Carruth's not going anywhere. You saw Jeff Gordon talking with Sammy Smith before the race. So Chevy is so piled up, and you even look at Trackhouse. They've got more drivers than they have seats available at the moment. So that's kind of starting to go down,
RCR, they're pretty well set with Austin Hill and Jesty Love. So Christian Eckes, I almost feel like if McAnally doesn't move upward, I think he has to probably search outside his manufacturer if he wants to go somewhere. I would look particularly at Ford. I think if a team like Thor Sport has an opening in trucks, and the reason why I say that if he goes to Ford is that Mark Rushbrook for Ford is on record. He said this back when Haley Deegan was hired to go to Xfinity. He said that they actually put trucks in as a higher priority than Cup. Not Cup, then Xfinity. I'm not Cup. Cup is the top priority, but he put it as a higher. Yeah.
Still.
I mean, yeah, I have my theories for why. We could get into that, but the purpose of it is to say, look, if you're Christian Eckes, I think if he wants to move up to Cup, he's going to have to go somewhere else because I don't think there's a lot of room for him at Chevy. I mean, yes, he's good, but there are just a lot of other really good drivers that are there, and it's really hard to envision Christian Eckes going kind of somewhere else. He does have some connection with Toyota. He was with Toyota early in his career, but he kind of struggled when he was with Toyota. And even you look at Toyota, I mean, they've got Corey Heim and Taylor Gray, and they're pretty well set. I really think, I like the idea of McAnally expanding to Xfinity. I'd love to see that. But I think if Christian Eckes wants to make his way up the ranks, I think he's got to go to Ford. I think if a Thor Sport ride opens up, absolutely. I think maybe if you watch, one guy I'm watching really closely in Xfinity right now is Riley Herbst. Because Riley Herbst, regardless of how good of a driver he is, he has a lot of funding behind him. And I really have a feeling if something opens up at Ford, could we see Riley Herbst jump up at some point? I don't know. We'll see. But I think Eckes might. I'd look at Ford, and honestly, if I'm Ford, I'm giving a heavy look at Christian Eckes because Ford's pipeline right now. I wrote about this in the Daily Downforce.
Pretty thin.
Ford's pipeline is super thin right now. I mean, who's the best? Dale Tanhardt, tell me who the best Ford prospect is right now. I'm just going to ask you that. I'll open the floor to you.
I guess it would have to be Cole Custer, technically, even though he's been in and out of Cup. I mean, he is right now outside of the Cup Series. I'd say he's the best Ford driver.
And it's him, but he's struggled in Cup. You have Riley Herbst, who has funding, but he only has one Xfinity win. And then you look at trucks. Not Ty Majeski's a good driver, but he's older, kind of a Truck Series lifer. You look at Ben Rhodes, same thing. Matt Kraft and the dudes never leaving the Truck Series. It's just there's nothing else there for Ford. So if I'm Christian Eckes, I'm taking a strong look at Ford right now. That's what I'm looking for, and it might mean staying in trucks, but I think that gives him a better shot at getting to the Cup Series. I do think one ride to watch for if he wants to look at Ford. I'm curious to see if he can maybe get some sort of an in with Roger Penske and go to someone like the Wood Brothers because, and this is a pipe dream, I don't have inside knowledge here, but the reason why I think that is because the Wood Brothers are a team that gets a lot of funding from Ford and Motorcraft and all those companies. So Christian Eckes, who if he's even a little bit lower on funding, he probably won't have as much pressure if he goes to a team like the Wood Brothers if he wants to jump up the Cup. But that's just kind of my thing, especially with Harrison Burton performing like he is. Ford's got to do something sometime soon because, Harrison Burton is just not it. So
yeah, I think Harrison got rushed to Cup early, and I've talked about that a lot. It's ever since the day he was announced as a Wood Brothers driver. When you go to the Xfinity Series, he won 4 races in 2020, and then in 2021, in a Joe Gibbs Toyota, he did not win a single race, and then he gets promoted to Cup. Yeah, I'm not surprised with Harrison Burton, and maybe that could open up a door for a guy like Christian Eckes. You mentioned earlier this points deal, right? Eckes has been phenomenal. He's got the wins. He's secure. Majeski leads the points. But when you stated that the playoffs are, in the Truck Series, because you have substantially less races than Xfinity and Cup in just the entire season, we're almost halfway to the actual playoff crunch when it comes to the Craftsman Truck Series. So now, while I'm not worried about the Corey Heims and the Ty Majeskis and hell, even a Tyler Ankrum who's been great on accumulating points, it's about time we start looking at this bubble heading into Texas and beyond because you got Ben Rhodes, two-time champ, defending champion of the series, only with a 6-point cushion over Tanner Gray. You got Jake Garcia, Daniel Dye, and Bailey Curry, and Stuart Friesen, and Chase Purdy all within 30 points of that cut line. A win will get you in. I don't think we see 10 different winners, so I think a win will for sure, or at least 10 different winners before the playoffs begin. I think a win will for sure get you in safely, and you can feel secure. So somebody like Layne Riggs, outside looking in. Dean Thompson's close near the top 20 in points. He's had some speed with some of these other Tricon guys. What are you looking at here on this playoff bubble as we move into the home stretch and determining our playoff field?
Yeah, I don't have the data on the Truck Series, but I will drop you some knowledge here. Is that in the Cup Series, and I wrote about this in the Daily Downforce this past week, was that after 7 races, which means there's 19 more races left in the Cup Series season, nobody has come from more than 60 points back to make the playoffs on points. Okay, you only have 10 races left if you're in the Truck Series. So all I'm saying is, look, if you're like back here and you're back like 40, 50 points, I mean, that is a huge hill that you have to climb in order to get there, especially when you look at some of these guys that are here on the bubble. So the thing that I find most interesting is that all the race winners, like the top 7 in points, are all within 40 points of each other. And then there's a really big gap because it's 35 points down to Matt Kraft, and then it's 19 to Grant Enfinger. So it's like top 7, you feel pretty safe they're going to be in the playoffs. It's this bottom 3 that's really looking very interesting. I'm definitely curious to see, because you saw, Grant Enfinger, at Martinsville yesterday, he's only 12 points above the cut line. I'm very concerned about Grant Enfinger because, man, you felt like Martinsville was going to be a race where he could do something on a short track. But unfortunately, that CR7 truck I'm sorry, but the equipment's just not as good as when he was in GMS. And that's frustrating, and that's sad because I felt like, Grant Enfinger, I feel like, is a better driver than that. But it's just is what it is. So I'm really concerned if I'm Grant Enfinger. That's the one thing I'm concerned with. Ben Rhodes, I'd like to think being in 10th. I think he's going to hop his way up there a little bit at some point. I think he'll create some separation, but I think Grant Enfinger is a guy that you kind of have to watch out for here at this point. But there are some big names, as you mentioned, that are well below the cut line. I look at Stuart Friesen, only 28 points below. Chase Purdy of Spire, 30 points below. I'd say watch out for a surprise win for Chase Purdy, given that he's in Spire equipment and he finished a solid 4th at Martinsville. I think 3rd at Martinsville. Give him a little bit. But honestly, if I'm Layne Riggs, sitting in 22nd in points, 57 points back, only 10 races to go, I'm dangerously close to must-win territory if I'm Layne Riggs.
Yeah, the guy I want to look at is what you said. It's Chase Purdy, Mississippi guy.
Yep.
His teammates are winning. They're running top 5. We talk about Kyle Busch in the 7, Roger Cruth in the 71 have both knocked down a win. Purdy had a pretty terrible start to the season overall, and he had a big point stay that moved him up in the standings where he finished 3rd, got some more stage points, and now he's sitting 16th. Pressure's on. I know this kid's got funding. Yep. He's been with KBM. He's been with Hattori. He's bounced around with some reputable teams that have won championships and a lot of races in this series. And now, with the Pangea of the Truck Series, all the landscape changing with KBM shutting down and GMS shutting down, the Chevy power has been split primarily between McAnally and Spire. And this 77 truck is a Spire team. So they should be held in the same retrospect as a KBM or a GMS. This team should be in the playoffs. This team should win a race. This team should be there in the conversation. So when you look at Chase Purdy, 16th in points, 20 or 30 points is absolutely doable in the next 10 races. But I think, you go a couple more races and he gets a DNF or just a very lackluster run where he loses points to that cut line, someone else wins. The pressure is going to start to build on Chase Purdy in the 77. So he's the number one guy I'm looking at. Stuart Friesen, of course, drives for his own team. He can go as long as he wants, and he's made the playoffs. He's a former winner. He should be in there too, no question. But I'm looking at Chase Purdy because of the amount of experience that he has and the level of equipment that he's driving.
Well, let's go deeper with Purdy. Let's talk about his career as a whole. Look at that Chevy camp. You have guys like Carson Kvapil, guys like Connor Zillich. I can't believe I blanked on his name. You look
Won
at
the car
those couple
score
of guys
race.
that are kind of coming. He did won a car. Those two really good late model drivers. If Chevy wants to bring those guys up at this point, Chase Purdy's the easiest guy to drop because he is performing the least out of his Spire guys. I think if I'm Chase Purdy, I think you have to win a race. You have to make the playoffs. I think if you want to keep your career going to some extent in the Truck Series, because I mean, if you're seeing you're seeing Roger Carruth going out winning races. You saw Nick Sanchez win a race. They're both well up in, as I mentioned, kind of that top seven in the Truck Series right now. That's kind of the bubble of guys that you feel are pretty safe to make it in. Both Roger Carruth and Nick Sanchez are in there. You've seen the 7 truck win a race with Kyle Busch, and you also saw Connor Zillich do really well in that truck. I mean, you're looking at Chase Purdy and you're looking over your shoulder at some of these guys on the way up. You got to start performing, or otherwise, I've got a good feeling that Chase Purdy could be looking over his shoulder at some of these other guys further down the pipeline. So I think, I mean, obviously, no reports have come out yet about Chase Purdy, being in danger for a ride, but I do think it's the story to watch for. But I am interested to see if he can find a win because he showed some speed at Martinsville. It wasn't like he just popped up there at the end of the race. It was a good strategy. He was there all night up towards the front, kind of quietly finished in the top 5. But, I mean, the dude needs to win a race. I think bottom line, needs to take home a checkered flag, take home a win, get himself into the playoffs, maybe try to pull like a Sam Mayer like he did last year in the Xfinity Series.
Go on a run.
Go on a run, make the round of 8, make the championship 4, something like that. Because, we all talk about Nick Sanchez and Roger Carruth and how good those guys are. If Chase Purdy keeps lagging behind, someone's going to take that spot.
Totally agree. This is a kid that has been around enough, good enough equipment, good enough experience. We expect him to run up front and start contending. So, Martinsville was fun. Now we got to look forward to Texas Motor Speedway coming up this weekend. Cup, Xfinity, and Trucks will all be running at Texas. And for the Craftsman Truck Series on Friday night, it's speedycash.com, 250, 7:30 p.m. Defending winner of the race is Carson Hocevar, who is not in the series anymore, moved up to Cup. And it was a crazy, crazy finish, at least. This race, this is just a tough stretch, man, because Martinsville hasn't been everybody's favorite. Texas has certainly not been everybody's favorite. And in this track, at least for the Truck Series, it was tough to pass. It was kind of a snoozer early on up until the end where all hell broke loose. And Nick Sanchez, who led 168 laps, just absolutely dominated the race, wrecked, coming to the white flag with a late race, massive crash. People give Hocevar a lot of blame with these type of wrecks. I think this is a case if you go back and watch that race. I think it was more of a racing deal. Sanchez kind of folded a little bit in a clutch time moment, kind of blocked, and it was just a racing incident where a lot of good trucks were involved in an accident at the end. Ryan Vargas got a top 10. Jack Wood got a top 10. Mason Massey actually finished 11th. Chris Wright finished 12th. Jake Garcia got a top 5. Chase Purdy, who we were just talking about, finished 2nd. Haley Deegan finished 6th in this race last year because of that massive accident that happened on the last lap. But obviously, Nick Sanchez, as I said, who led all those laps, to me, that's the guy I got my eye on. I gotta go out here and say, I think Sanchez has got to be the favorite to win this race when it comes to Friday night because of the redemption factor. This should have been his first win. He led all the laps only to get it taken away from him. Carson Hocevar led 1 lap in this race, and it was the white flag lap. So I want to get your thoughts on what you're looking for on Friday night. One big storyline you have in mind, and is this the Nick Sanchez redemption tour?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think this is the Nick Sanchez redemption tour. I think this is a race he's expecting to win. I think this is a race that he feels like he has a lot of he's putting a lot of stock into. I mean, this is a guy that led pretty much every lap of that race last year, and then ended up getting involved in an incident late in the race. So, I mean, tough night for Nick Sanchez that was last year, but I think that's the case. I agree. I think this is this is the Nick Sanchez. I think this is the Nick Sanchez show, or it's his race to lose. I'm curious to see kind of how the entry list looks, because last year's Truck Series race at Texas was kind of a weird one, because if you remember,
Cup was somewhere else, right?
Yes, this was a standalone weekend, because this was when IndyCar raced at Texas in April last year. Cup Series didn't come to Texas until the fall. So, by the way, RIP IndyCar at Texas, man. RIP to that.
That is a shame.
That was really sad. That was really sad to see, but I digress. No, I mean, I think that's going to be interesting to watch. You're not going to see probably a lot of these like random entrants kind of coming into the race. I don't think you're going to see a ton of that this weekend, but I'm curious to see exactly if Nick Sanchez can keep that going. There are a couple of other guys I kind of have my eye on. I already talked about him a bit. Majeski. Majeski won both stages at Las Vegas, the other intermediate track that we've raced on this season to this point. Atlanta, I don't count as an intermediate. I don't think anyone does anymore.
No.
But I think Majeski is really a guy to watch, because he led the most laps in that race. He ended up winning both stages. Raja Kruth obviously won. So he's obviously a guy to watch for. But Majeski is kind of my dark horse with this one. And again, I already mentioned it, but I mean, these next few races, I mean, a lot of intermediates coming up on the schedule. I mean, you even go so far as to, you take it all the way, into June. I mean, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna count this. Out of these next, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the next 7 races are at intermediate tracks. Of course, Worldwide Technology Raceway, I think Gateway is kind of an oddball to an extent, and so is Darlington, but I mean, there's a lot of intermediates coming up. So I think that the guys that were really good at Las Vegas, I think, are the guys to watch for these next few weeks. Because, you have one short track race in there mixed in with North Wilkesboro. You don't have a super speedway race coming up until you go to Talladega in October. So I think this is going to be, I think hopefully we're going to see some clean races where I think we're really going to see which guys are the ones to beat. I think is what we're going to see these next 2 weeks. And it all starts this weekend at Texas with a 250-mile race on Friday night, which I'm super excited for. I'm always a fan of the Truck Series on Friday night. I think I think that should be the night every Truck Series race is run on. Should be Friday night. That's why I think lights should be at every NASCAR track. I'm in agreement with Bob Pockris on that. That needs to be every NASCAR Craftsman. Every NASCAR track has to have lights for that reason. But I think that this Texas race is going to be very telling for what we see these next few weeks. So
yeah,
buckle up.
Yeah, I agree. There's no better start to a NASCAR weekend than getting a truck race on Friday night. Hell, even Thursday nights are cool too. But the norm has become the Friday night Truck Series show. And guys, keep an eye on, because of what you just talked about. This was a standalone event last year, not the same. You've got all 3 NASCAR National Series in attendance for this one, which makes me believe that potentially has Kyle Busch hit his 5 yet? I don't think he's done all 5.
I don't think he has.
Makes me nervous.
I'm going to look it up.
Because
we have it.
This is going to come out before this podcast is going to come out before the entry list, and that 7 truck I haven't seen announce a driver.
So I have it for y'all, just so y'all know. If you head to dailydownforce.com, we do have an article on every Cup Series driver's Xfinity and truck schedule for 2024. So I'm going to scroll through and check and see here. Ross Chastain, he's not racing this weekend. Kyle Busch, indeed, let's see. Is he on the entry list? Hold on one quick second. I want to see. I believe I saw Texas on there. I just want to confirm that it was on there. So Kyle Busch, I think, might very much be on the entry list this weekend. Let's look for some other ones. Zane Smith's another one. Zane Smith is going to be there this weekend, so we're going to get at least 2 Cup Series drivers in the Truck Series this weekend. It looks like we're going to get Kyle Busch. We're going to get Zane Smith. Both of those were behind the wheel at Las Vegas as well. I tell you what, Zane Smith really needs a good run, because he's been struggling in the Cup Series this year, man. I feel kind of bad for him, but yeah, we're going to see Kyle Busch. We're going to see Zane Smith. That's your 2.
Oh man, that just ruined my weekend. Okay, well, we get Kyle Busch back. Hoorah. Congratulations, guys. That's going to be tough because he was good at Vegas, and obviously his teammate Raja won. You talk about the only other true intermediate we've been to. Kyle Busch had a I think it was a safety violation, the final green flag pit stop, which took him out of contention at Vegas. A lot of guys had penalties. Sanchez had a penalty, I remember, and Majeski, no shocker there, was speeding on the final pit stop. So when you look back at Vegas and see the finishing order, you got to consider that at the end of that race, someone like Kyle Busch would have been in the top 5. Ty Majeski would have been in the top 5. Hell, Ty Majeski still came back and finished 10th after a speeding penalty. And then Nick Sanchez, another guy that had run around the top 5 throughout the night, was another one that had a penalty who probably would have finished up in the top 10 for that one as well. And we already talked about what he did here in 2023. I really like Nick Sanchez as Kyle Busch's stiffest competition. I'm curious about Tricon because it seems like their weaker link as a program has been on the intermediate to the mile and a half. Now, Corey Heim is Corey Heim. He can do anything anywhere, it seems like, and is probably just going to get better. But when we think about a Taylor Gray, when we think about a Tanner Gray, when we think about who's going to be in the one truck, which is going to be the quote-unquote all-star truck, that could be a Cup guy. We saw Christopher Bell in that truck in Las Vegas. So keep an eye on that as well when we get into Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'll give you a counter to this Tricon thing because I have the Vegas stats pulled up. Tricon finished 3rd through 5th at Las Vegas this past March.
Right, but
5th. I'm 3rd, grade 4. But to your point,
all those guys had penalties.
Let's look back to Texas last year. Only one Tricon truck in the top 10. That was Corey Heim finishing in 7th. Everyone else was kind of caught up. Everyone else was caught up in late incidents. Tanner Gray was caught up in an incident. So was Dean Thompson. So to your point, there could be something there to that. I think
the Chevys
maybe they got it turned around.
Yeah. They as the flagship. We discussed this last week as a flagship program for Toyota in the Truck Series. I think they need to be better in the mile and a halves. They need to be a little bit better because Spire is obviously great. McAnally can run top 5. Ankrum finished 2nd at Vegas. Eckes finished 6th. They need to be a little bit better, I think, when it comes to winning speed. And I think, to sum everything back up again, I do think Nick Sanchez is, if Kyle Busch is racing and Zane Smith, I think Nick Sanchez is the biggest competition out of everybody in the field this weekend. And I can't wait to bet on him because I think the books will have Majeski and Heim as the favorites outside of Kyle Busch. And then we'll see, they got to value Eckes now too, right? Shit, you got to have Eckes, Heim, and Majeski right up there behind Kyle Busch if Kyle Busch is on the entry list. And then Zane Smith is going to be, by default, is going to be right next to Kyle Busch. So it makes me think that, if you're listening to this now, I would expect to get Nick Sanchez at 8-1 or better this weekend. And I just love the idea of that because you know how good he is at qualifying as well. And if he starts out up front, the way this race flowed in 2023, it was very, very tough to pass the leader. It did not happen until the white flag crash that ended up with a host of our wins. So that'll be exciting. Also different conditions. Remember, that was run on a Saturday in the daytime. This is going to be run under the lights on Friday night. So this could flow a little bit differently than it did last year. And I honestly hope it does because that race was a tough one when it comes to just just pure inability to pass and being a huge track position race. Hopefully with the different conditions, maybe that could help us out a little bit with the quality of the race. Now, moving on to the final segment here, the segment we do every single week. Kill me because I had Ty Majeski as my winner last week and he finished 2nd. One winner, one loser, and an underdog. Talking about our picks, our favorites, and our fades. I'll start with you, man. Who is your winner? Who is your one guy that you're favoriting this weekend?
We just talked about
Sanchez.
him. It's Nick Sanchez. It's absolutely Nick Sanchez. I'm more interested in telling you about my dark horse pick, so just move on. We've talked enough about Sanchez.
Yeah, okay. Go ahead and give me all three. Give me your loser and your dark horse.
I'll do it. So my dark horse pick, and I don't know if I'd consider this guy a dark horse, but I'm saying him just because I don't know if people associate him with success in intermediates very often. I'm going Ty Majeski. The guy led 40 laps and swept both stages at Las Vegas. There's something there. This guy also just finished second at Martinsville. I mean, you mentioned this guy sometimes can kind of fall away at the end of a race, so I might be paying for this. I might be paying for this one in terms of my own pride, but I'm saying Majeski is kind of my dark horse here for this race this weekend. As far as a guy that I expect to fade this weekend, I hate to do it to this guy, but I got to go with Layne Riggs. I mean, Layne Riggs we've seen it this year to this point on the big oval tracks. We saw it at Daytona. We saw it at Atlanta. I mean, this guy just really doesn't have a lot of experience on these types of racetracks, and I'm just feel like that's going to hurt him this week, and I feel like he's kind of going to have to deal with that. Now, in fairness to him, he did get himself a top 10 finish at Las Vegas last year, and he did make his first Truck Series or Xfinity Series start last year for Colic Racing at Texas, so he could prove me wrong, but I've not loved what I've seen from Layne Riggs to this point on the bigger racetracks, and so as a result, I've got to fade Layne Riggs here. This one, look at his Truck Series stats. I have them pulled up for me right now. I mean, this dude, look at his intermediate finishes: 27th at Nashville, 22nd at Las Vegas. I mean, that's just not not good enough, and I'm really concerned about what we're going to see this weekend from him at Texas, and I hope it doesn't happen. I'm not rooting for it, but I wouldn't be shocked if you see Layne Riggs continue to struggle some here down the stretch. So I wouldn't be shocked to see that.
All right, tell me this real quick before I give mine. Are you positive that Kyle Busch is racing this weekend?
I am positive that Kyle Busch is racing this weekend. I am refraining from picking Kyle Busch just because, honestly, I feel like that's the easy pick, and I am not about that.
No, that's okay.
I'm not about making the easy pick. So
no, and that's not why I was asking, because when you were talking about your article that you referenced, I didn't know if you were like 100% from what you were looking at.
Yes, he
is.
Yes, he is racing this weekend.
Damn.
That's my answer.
Okay. All right, well, I'm going to take Kyle Busch as my favorite because I feel like we can't take the same guy. And the jinx is in effect. The jinx is in effect because I'm going to be betting on Sanchez, who you got as a favorite. And, yeah, Kyle Busch is going to be fast. He's going to run up front. Let's just hope that something goes wrong. And because I'm picking him, maybe I'm throwing that energy on him like I threw on Majeski. Maybe we'll get Kyle Busch finishing second to the guy that I will be betting on, which is Nicholas Sanchez. When we go to losers, one guy to fade. Last week I had Enfinger. By the way, that was a good fade.
That was a good pick.
I got to give myself a little bit of credit for that one. For a fade, I'm going to go with, this is crazy, I'm going to go with Christian Eckes. Christian Eckes. Yeah, I think if there is a weak point, and a weak point is a strong thing to say about how good this guy and this team has been. But if there's a point where McAnally, it seems like in the long run speed department compared to Spire, even a Corey Heim, it seems like. I feel like in the long run speed, which I expect to see some long runs here, I feel like they fade a little bit. I think Eckes could run top 5, definitely. A guy that can run top 5 anywhere. But when it comes to their overall speed, I think Eckes is not going to be a winning contender this weekend. I think he can run somewhere between 5th and 10th, but I think there's 4 or 5 guys that, based on the quality of their trucks, are going to outrun him this weekend. That's my bold prediction.
Yeah,
so
I think to your point, I'll give you this with Christian Eckes. I'll just add this context for you. Dude didn't score a single stage point at Las Vegas. Did not.
And he did.
So to your point, he did not score a stage point at Las Vegas.
Yeah, and he did. Well, he did win at Kansas in 2023, which isn't an intermediate, but he only led 2 laps. Late race circumstance type of deal. So somebody would go back and look, well, he won at Kansas, so I guess he's, this is a bad call, but it's like, well, he did win, but it was a late race situation like what we saw last year with Hocevar winning. If you don't get the chaos with a couple laps to go, I feel like this is a safe fade because Eckes is a pretty good restarter. I'll give him that too. So I'm going to fade Eckes. Kyle Busch is my winner. And as my underdog, I am going to go with Jake Garcia. Now, this is kind of he finished 5th here last year in a McAnally truck in the number 35. Partially, it was due to circumstance with a late race caution. But I at the beginning of the year, I kind of talked about this guy as like my underdog for the entire 2024 season. I feel like this is a kid that he's extremely young. He's knocked off several top 10s in his first couple of years, or his first year last year. He hasn't had the success yet this year, but I believe in the quality of ThorSport. Ben Rhodes has had some good intermediate runs over the past year and a half. He won at Charlotte last May. And Matt Crafton has had some good runs as well. Let's add Jake Garcia into the fold. I think this is a kid that can go out, qualify well, keep his track position, run around the top 10, run around the top 5. I totally think he's capable of it. So, got to give a dark horse. It's a kid that I don't think I've given it as a dark horse yet in 2024. So, let's go with Garcia. How about it?
I mean, Garcia's a guy that could use a good run. I mean, this guy, he's out of the playoffs currently, and he doesn't have a top 10 yet, which I think was disappointing considering how well he ran with McAnally last year. I mean, he showed some promise last year. So, I mean, I'll tell you what, I mean, a guy that could use a good run. And I think Jake Garcia, considering the fact that Jake Garcia is the youngest Ford prospect right now. So I think Ford is kind of hoping that Jake Garcia does a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, that's something to watch for. I'm curious, but that's a guy that could use a good run. So
yeah. No question about it. I think it's a formidable spot for Jay Garcia to run better than he has all of 2024. Be sure to catch the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, speedycash.com 250 on Friday night, FS1, 7:30 p.m. at Texas Motor Speedway. I think it'll be a fun race, 167 laps. And we've got our picks. Hopefully, let us know on Twitter. Tag at Daily Downforce, at Dale Tanhardt, at J Lipowski 18. Let us know what you're thinking about when it comes to who you believe is going to be a front runner, who you think is going to be someone to fade, and maybe a dark horse for Friday night's race. Be sure to follow us on social media at Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, for me at Dale Tanhardt, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at Daily Downforce, and on YouTube as well. And then Jay Lipowski, my co-host here, Josh J. Lipowski 18 on Twitter, and be sure to check out everything he's got going on the Daily Downforce, and bookmark dailydownforce.com and check us out there every single day. And be sure, if you like what you heard on this podcast or any of the ones we've recorded in the past and will in the future, make sure to subscribe to the Pickup Throwdown podcast in your favorite podcast platform, whether it be Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio. We are available on all major platforms. So, for Josh Lipowski, I'm Dale Tanhardt. Enjoy the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series this weekend, this Friday night at Texas Motor Speedway. Let's have a good, fun race weekend, and we'll catch you back next Sunday night. Or I guess this goes out Monday, so we'll catch you next Monday for the recap and preview for the next Craftsman Truck Series event. Thanks for listening.